Okay, this video is the third and final video in solving radical equations. To be able to solve these last type of radical equations, we have to be good at squaring binomials. And we've already done ones like number 1, where everything's pretty straightforward. So if you remember, when you square a binomial, you've got to write it out twice. And now we're going to distribute, so I get x squared minus 7x plus 49. Combine the terms in the middle, and there's your final answer. Now, number 2 looks different, but it's the exact same thing. So we're going to write it out twice. So the square root of x plus 4 times the square root of x plus 4. Okay, and now when you multiply it, multiplying something by itself is the same as squaring it. So the square root of x times the square root of x is just like saying the square root of x squared, which we know. When you square a radical, it cancels it. So we just get x, and then over here, we get plus 4 square root x, plus 4 square root x, and then plus 16. Got to combine like terms in the middle. So we get x plus 8 square root x minus 16. And that's our final answer. All right, let's try this again on number 3. So on this one, we've got the square root of x minus 5 times the square root of x minus 5. So we'll distribute. Remember, multiplying something by itself is the same as squaring it, so it cancels the radical. So I get x minus 5 square root x minus 5 square root x plus 25. Combine like terms, and there's your final answer. Okay, one more. Now this one's got something different under the radical, but notice, not going to change much. So because it's squared, I write it out twice. Square root of 2x times square root of 2x is 2x. And then this gives me minus 6 square root 2x, minus 6 square root 2x, and plus 36. Again, I've got like terms. Now notice on 2 and 4, and on 1, when we added it, it doesn't change the variable. So this was just x, radical x, radical x. So again, it's not going to change this. So it's just going to be minus 12 square root 2x plus 36. And that's our answer. Okay, let's try and solve these. Now, when we solve these and we've got more than one radical and we got things outside of the radical, ideally you do not want to have more than one radical on each side of the equal sign. So since I have one on each side, I'm ready to go ahead and square both sides. So when I do that on the left, it cancels the radical and I get x plus 3. On the right, I have to write it out just like we did up above. Oops. All right, so no simplifying here, but now I got to multiply. This gives me x minus 3 square root x minus 3 square root x plus 9. Combine like terms first. Okay, so what do you do from here? Well, we're going to need to get rid of that radical eventually to be able to solve it, but I don't want it. And to get rid of the radical, I got to square it. I do not want to square it right now because I've got too much with that radical. So I want to get that x and 9 first to the other side. So I'm going to subtract x from both sides, and I'm going to subtract 9. Well, these cancel out, leaving me with negative 6 equals negative 6 square root x. Okay, I could square both sides now, but it's going to be more beneficial to me if I get that radical by itself. Oops, that's not what I meant to write. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 6. Here they cancel out. They cancel out because negative 6 divided by negative 6 is 1. Now this equation is much simpler. So now to solve, I'm going to square both sides. So I get x equals 1. And we're done. Okay, let's try another one. Number 2. On number 2, we got more than one radical just like we did before, but like I said, you don't want to start squaring until you get just one radical on each side. And based on previous experience, I can tell you that if you've got just one term under the radical, that should go with the number that's not in the radical. So I'm going to move the square root of x to both sides. And when I do that, I get the square root of x plus 6 equals And you can write it like we had up above, square root of x plus 2. Okay, now that I have it this way, now I'm going to square both sides. So here I get x plus 6. And then when I'm squaring the binomial, I have to write it out twice. So I get x plus 6 equals, this is going to be x, pen's not writing, plus 2 square root x plus 2 square root x plus 4. Okay, combine like terms first. All right, now from here, to be able to solve this equation, I want to get that radical by itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is the adding and subtracting. So I'm going to subtract the x and subtract the 4. You could do this in 2 steps, but I'm going to save a little space and time. So this gives me 2 equals, and this is going to be 4 square root x. So now to solve, I'm going to divide both sides by 4. So I get 1/2 equals the square root of x. All right, now we're ready to solve, so I'm going to square both sides. And when you square the right side, you just get x. When you square a fraction, you got to square the top, which is 1, because 1 squared is 1, and 2 squared is 4. So x is 1/4. Okay, one last one, and then we're done with these notes. On number 3, again, you don't want to start squaring until you have just one radical on each side. And if you're going to have to pick and choose, the radical that's just one term and is more simple, it's going to work better with the number that's outside of the radical. So to do this, I'm going to add the square root of x to both sides. So over here, I get square root of x plus 3 equals the square root of x plus 1. Now I'm ready to square both sides. So I get x plus 3 equals, and now I have to write it out twice. So I get x plus 3 equals the square root of x times square root of x is x, and I get plus 1 square root x plus 1 square root x plus 1. Combine like terms in the middle, so that gives me 2 square root x plus 1. Again, we're going to have to square this again to undo that radical, but I don't want to do that until the radical is by itself. So I'm going to subtract x from both sides and subtract 1 from both sides. So this gives me 2 equals 2 square root x. So to solve, I'm going to divide by 2. So I get 1 equals the square root of x. Finish the problem off by squaring both sides. 1 squared is 1. Square root of x squared is x. Now, you will notice on these 3 equations, I never checked my answer. That's because I don't need to worry about extraneous solutions when I'm not factoring. When you factor, that's when you've got a higher chance of getting the extraneous solutions and you need to check. When you're not factoring, it's not as large of a concern.